I'm going to call this meeting to order. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the School District of Waukesha's Board of Education Teaching and Learning Committee meeting for Tuesday, April 5th, 2022. We begin tonight under general business. Stacy, has the meeting been properly posted?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Any speakers signed up tonight? Okay, thank you. Moving on to our action items, approval of our Teaching and Learning Committee meeting minutes from March 1st, 2022.
I move for approval.
Thank you, Mr. Baumgart.
I'll second.
Thank you, Ms. Roddy. Any discussion, questions, comments, corrections? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes, Stacy, 5-0. Next item for action is approval of the AP Calculus textbook. And we have Rachel Herman here, our Director of Secondary Learning, here to give us some information on that. So, welcome, Rachel.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm going to just move this all because I'm going to be up here for a little bit and some people are going to be joining me, so I'm going to sit on the end here. All right. Thanks for having me tonight. We are looking to seek approval of the recommendation to adopt the AP Calc book that you have heard about over the course of this year. The feedback continues to be consistent with what we shared with you last time. It's viewed very favorably by both students and teachers. It aligns to the newly revised courses through AP, and nothing has changed in terms of our pricing. And I don't know if you remember last time, but they are including a hard copy with our pricing, which is like unheard of, really good deal. So we are seeking approval of this as our recommended resource.
Great.
Mr. Baumgart.
Seeing as how we've been through this for about 3 or 4 months now, I'm going to move for approval of accepting the AP, that was AP, right?
Yes.
The AP Calculus book. Thank you.
I'll second.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Roddy. Any discussion, comments, questions? Mr. Como?
Yeah, just real quick, Calc Chat and Calc View, can you just give me a skinny on those?
Say that again, Calc
Chat and Calc View? It's part of the title?
That would probably be a Dan Paczynski question that I don't have the answer to.
So I can kind of assume what that is.
Yeah.
I just
apologize.
didn't know if
I
we-
can get you the answer to that, but
That's
I don't
fair.
have it yet.
That's
Yeah.
fair. That's not going to prevent me to, voting on it, so.
Anything else? Okay. Seeing none, all in favor of approval of the AP Calculus textbook, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes, Stacy, 5-0. Next action item, approval of the high school social studies course requirement. And it looks like we have information in front of us regarding that.
Correct, and I'm going to airplay this as well. So we have been talking over the course of the year about our social studies required courses. And over the course of the year, we have solicited feedback from obviously our educators, our teachers, our administrators, our students, community members through our district curriculum council, and parents as well as board members. And this, what we're presenting for you tonight are really 3 options based on all of that feedback that we've received. So I'm going to review the options that are in front of you, and we may be at a place tonight after hearing those options where you as board members feel like we can take action and move to recommend one of the options moving forward for the 23-24 school year. We may be at a place where there's just more information gathering that needs to take place and we're not ready to take action. So I'm going to just review some of the proposals. I'm going to review some considerations for you as you weigh these proposals and then leave it in your hands to determine what you think is the best course of action. So option number 1 If you recall, this was the original proposal that came out of our, the curricular design process that you as the board have approved. So this was the original recommendation from the teachers and the administrators who served on that team, and that would include moving world history to a year-long course and removing economics as a required course, and then requiring that all students take a semester of personal finance. Again, after collecting feedback on that original proposal, we were asked to come back to the drawing board with what potential alternatives could we look at. So this was a second proposal or option for you to consider. This would continue with the recommendation for world history being a year-long course. However, in this scenario, we would be stating that a student could choose, but they would be required to take one or the other of personal finance or economics. In this option, it gives parents and students the decision, right? Is personal finance a course that's much more centered around a student and a child's own financial independence, a better option to develop for their needs based on their post-high school plans, or is economics, right? A course that really looks at big systems, right? The free trade market, and is that something that's more suited to what they're doing post-high school? In this option, the credit requirement would not increase, so the credit requirement would remain at 3.5 of social studies if the students chose economics. I'm sorry, I said that wrong. This would be 3 credits of social studies, which is what the state requires, and then either, again, that 0.5 in personal finance or econ. The third option, oh, go ahead, Kelly.
I think that's incorrect. It would be still the 0.5 of government. Shouldn't it be 3.5?
Yes, you're right. It is 3.5. Thank you. Option 3 then is the final option for your consideration that our team has explored. And again, this has been a year-long endeavor in terms of bringing this back to our team, collecting that feedback. In this option, we would be requiring the 4 credits of social studies, which would allow us to maintain world history as a year-long course, and then in addition, require economics and government. So just, again, some considerations for you as you discuss this. So option 1 was a recommendation based on the curricular design process. Option 1, as a reminder, gives you access to state grant funds, so that $30,000, if we require personal finance, those funds are not available in either of the 2 other options. Option number 2 provides choice to the students and the family to pick which course best meets the needs of their child's career college plan. Options 1 and 2 do not increase the graduation credit requirements for social studies. Option 3 has staffing and curriculum implications by increasing the credit requirements within a department. So something to note is anytime we obviously increase credit requirements within a department, we staff that because now we are requiring that students take that course. So there would be staffing implications as well as curricular implications. And then option 3 places personal finance standards in economics and not in personal finance. So if we go with option 3, it would not make sense, or we couldn't really, because we would not be in line with state statute to remove those personal finance standards. They would remain in both places. And then just a final consideration is that our team intends to bring you in May, we're finishing up as a secondary social studies team, our curricular pilots. And so as you remember, when we did a root cause analysis of our achievement and our instructional practices, one of the things that we realized is that we have been curating our own curriculum. And as a result, that has led us to perhaps lowered standards. It's perhaps led to teachers not having the time or ability to differentiate around a curricular resource for their students because they're spending all of their time finding the resources. And so if we don't know what the required scope and sequences for social studies that the board would approve, the further that decision is delayed, the further we go without a curricular resource, because it would obviously not make sense to purchase a curricular resource to support a course or an area that might be on the table, off the table. And then in addition, it's very logistical, but I was actually on the phone with one of my vendors today for a resource that we're viewing very favorably. And I said, I need to get copies for my board. And she said, Just so you know, there's shipping delays, and I will be lucky to get those to you by the end of April. And that is a real thing that our companies are telling us that they're facing, is with the paper shortage and the just delays in that the further, again, we delay this, the longer we live in the land of teachers are curating their own curriculum. So that's all I have for you, and I kind of leave it in your hands now to ask questions if you have them around these options.
Mr. Baumgart.
Rachel, I just want to be clear on a couple things. Number 3, 4 credits of social studies will be required. There is no opportunity for personal finance in that one?
Students could elect to take it as an elective course.
As an elective?
Correct.
But it would not be a part of the required program?
Correct.
And in option 2, they would have a choice between taking personal finance or taking economics?
Correct.
Correct. I mean, that's correct, right?
Yes.
If a student was so interested into taking, just say both of them,
Absolutely.
personal finance and subsequently economics, okay?
We have students that do that now. We currently have 373 students enrolled next year, scheduled to take personal finance with the economics requirements still in place. So we have many students that...
So this one is actually in place?
It's not in place in that a student right now cannot elect to not take economics.
Oh.
They have to stay in
Thank you.
economics. Yep.
Thank you, appreciate that. That was my question, those were my questions, thank you.
Mr. Como.
For option 2 and option 3, would we still have in world history that economics thread?
Yes.
So there'd be additional economics, if you wish.
Correct. The standards demand of us that integration of economics, so regardless of the course sequence, what courses do exist or what courses we land on, will integrate the economic standards as many of them currently do.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Rachel, with option 1, with the state grant, that $30,000, is that indefinite, or is that for a limited number of years?
It is not indefinite. It's obviously until the grant dollars run out, so it's definitely not an indefinite amount. However, in working with Molly Habenschild, who would be overseeing that grant, it would definitely be a significant amount of money to help us to create the experience we want to create in personal finance.
Do you have a ballpark of how many years that could?
I don't. I could find that out from
But it would be more-
many other districts have accessed the grant,
Right.
because again, personal finance is required in many of our surrounding districts, so I can definitely look into that for you.
Your best educated guess would be more than 1 year?
I would, yeah.
Okay. Okay. And then wasn't there something with the Department of Public Instruction that they were looking at requiring
There's currently a bill.
personal finance, or, yes, okay, could you give me an update on that?
There's currently a bill, and it's, I would say, drafted in legislation. I don't know, Jim, if you want to take that?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So, we talked about it in government relations last week. That was one of the bills that didn't get out of the legislature, didn't pass both houses, so it didn't come forward to the governor. It would require 1 credit of personal finance. That certainly could come back in the future, however.
Okay.
Yep.
Dr. Piasek, did you have something to add?
I was
to
just
that?
going to clarify.
Okay.
AB 899 didn't actually.
Did not?
send
Okay.
it, so.
Okay.
Greg, back to...
Yep.
Back
Mr.
to-
Baumgart.
On option 1, 3 credits of social studies and a half credit of personal finance. Now, personal finance is not classified as a social study, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
And option 1 and 2 both maintain a 3.5 social studies requirement.
And that,
that semester, so what had been that 0.5, where we're losing it in econ, is going into world history by making it a full year course.
so that's where you moved, okay. So the econ course doesn't exist in this one?
Again, which option, I'm sorry?
Well, option 1.
In option 1, econ exists as an elective. Students
Okay.
can take it and earn additional social studies credit, but it would not be required.
So similarly, a student with the encouragement of family, I would guess, could end up going personal finance and economics.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep.
So it's not, really that different from number 2, except for the way the credits are arranged, I think.
Options 1 and 2 are I would say, very similar. You are correct.
But there's money associated with number 1.
There's money associated with number 1.
Mr. Como?
Thank you, Greg. As far as graduation credits go, in respect to other districts, I had just asked Dr. Siebert the other day if he had some information on that, and I just wanted to put this in perspective a little bit for us. The range of required credits for graduation from the school districts that you had on hand ranged from 22 up to 28.5. Kettle Moraine had the highest number of requirements. We were at 25, I believe. Is that right?
That's correct.
So we're kind of in the middle there. And I'm going to harken back to, well, I think our last discussion we had on changing graduation credits was dealing with Fayette, I think, where we were looking at the option of counting a sport towards Fayette. Was that the last time we had addressed graduation requirements? I think that was.
The very last thing was just adding sports. That didn't change the credits. Maybe I
Yeah,
misunderstood
the
it.
credits remain the same, but that was the last
Self-assessment.
change to that particular, I think to that particular policy.
Yeah, the addition of sports for PE, and then the change before that clarified what would constitute a virtual experience. So those were the last 2 adjustments to that policy. We used to have an e-achieve requirement, and we then changed that to a virtual experience.
So if we were to go with option 3, we obviously would have to modify our policy.
Correct.
Is that correct, Joe?
We would have to do a policy correction,
Okay.
revision.
The other 2, there might be, but not from a credit perspective. So there'd be a revision to the policy for everything but option 1?
Option 1 would require, the policy as it's currently written, we outline within our graduation requirement policy the specific courses that students need to take. So there would be a revision regardless of which option you choose. But you said it correctly when you said option 1 and 2 do not change the graduation requirement total. That credit amount remains the same in options 1 and 2 as we currently have it. Option 3 would increase it by a 0.5.
Mr. Como, we've also changed the math sequence in the graduation requirements. I believe we changed the science in the graduation requirements recently as well.
Okay.
Same number of credits, just different courses.
Okay.
Rachel, do you have any estimates of the cost with option 3 with additional staffing? What that would even amount to?
So we have one other department right now in our core area that requires 4 credits, and that's our English department. And so it's hard to say because our social studies, I will say, has many elective choices that students, again, take in addition to these required courses. So psychology is one of probably our most popular social studies courses, AP Psychology. We have a class called Social Issues. So it really would depend on how many students sign up for those electives. Whereas English, our English courses, which is the other department that has 4 credits required, does not have that variety of elective offerings. And so we've not really come across this staffing scenario yet, but again, it's when you increase the number of credits, again, a student's required to take.
Right, and if it was required, how many years would students have to take it?
Right now, the sequence that we currently have, we have students who take it, will sometimes double up and take it their junior or senior year, but I would say majority of our students take economics their senior year.
Okay. So could that have us running a class of 3 or 4 students?
Can you repeat that question? I'm sorry.
Could that requirement, I mean, because
Oh.
it's a graduation requirement, could
Yeah.
it end up where we would be running a class of 3 or 4 students?
No, not likely. We
Okay.
don't typically, when something's required, we generally see the numbers balance
Okay.
better than that.
Okay. And then whatever option we would go with, if any, when would that start going into effect?
We would begin it with the incoming class, the freshman class of 23-24. So
Okay.
next year would remain status quo.
Status quo.
And then we would start that with the incoming class.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Como?
Yeah, so, you know, I appreciate you bringing forward different options. I have to tell you, I'm struggling a little bit, though, trying to analyze this right now, especially option 3. If we're going to, even a half credit, I mean, half credit additional, half credit towards graduation might not seem like a lot, but I don't recall off the top of my head what the balance is between other things like natural science and Phi-Ed and, you know, what would be driving social studies. I think that would be the highest number of credits that we would require from any discipline, right? Is that,
English, again, is the only other.
that would be, that's 4?
That's 4, correct.
Okay. I'm just struggling with, I don't recall what that is, so I would like to at least have some time to be able to wrap my hands around that a little bit, just try to look at that and see what that balance would look like.
Greg?
Mr. Baumgart?
Yeah, interesting. I have a problem with option 3 also. As far credits, and personal finance is only an elective. And in my mind, personal finance should be required one way or another, and that, again, that's taking 3 away from me. The other question I have, relative to the same situation, option 1 requires personal finance, which I like. Option 2 gives you the option of personal finance or economics, yet it's possible that very soon personal finance will be required by the state. Aren't we saying that? Or is that an if?
It's an if.
Which makes 2, you couldn't use 2 that way, because it's an option that you're giving right now. I'm just getting, this is the way I'm understanding it, am I correct?
Yeah, so what we would require students to do is take one or the other. They could most certainly choose to take both.
But if you take economics in number 2, and the state is requiring you to take personal finance, you're going to have to do both of them.
So the personal finance standards that the state requires that you teach in high school, we can infuse in economics. It's
Oh.
a small portion of economics. So it's not, if you think of economics as being like a 16-week-long course, or right, just the personal finance section of economics is not going to take up that whole time, right? So we can infuse those standards still. It would live in both places.
So that would protect it
Yes,
for number 2.
correct.
Then the biggest difference between those 2 is the money?
Money is attached to number 1, it's not attached to number 2. And then I would say again, in number 2, we're really putting the choice of which course, because they are 2 very distinctly different courses.
Yeah.
And so we are giving the option to parents and students to decide which course best, right, meets their needs. And we would obviously, equip our counselors, as we always do, with here's the syllabus for both courses, here's, our counselors can speak to those course offerings, and so to help guide those decisions. But option 2 really provides the choice to the families. And we know we have families who really greatly value what they have learned in economics, and they are, right, I can teach my child the personal finance. But as you heard from Molly Havenshield, right, like that guarantee of personal finance, right, and what that does for students. For some families, they might choose, I want them to get that deep dive in school, and maybe, right, they're a parent who says, you're going to take both. I just did that with my child. I signed him up for a class that he doesn't want to take, but he is going to take it anyway. So, we do still have that option. And
Thank you. That makes me much more comfortable with number 2.
Rachel, could you tell me what the $30,000 $30,000 grant a year would be used for?
Sure. So a variety of things. So one is it can support our curriculum development process. So when we bring teachers to the table to look at refining the course, to look at any type of curricular revision that needs to happen, we can use the funds to pay them. Personal finance, we do a pretty extensive learning experience. Many of you have probably been there with our financial literacy experience that we do. And so we could use the funds to help support that experience, which I believe was at WCTC this past, right? Last year. So we could use it for that. We can use it for staffing. So again, it would be limited, but the grant is pretty open in terms of what it all can be used for.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Mr. Como?
So, your last bullet point under considerations of delaying the decision kind of put some pressure on you guys. I'm trying to understand how much pressure. So, I mean, a month, 2 months, 3 months, where's the breaking point?
So if you think of our timeline, we like to get you a curricular resource. We'd like to get that into your hands at least twice before we would seek for adoption. And so right now, if we delay, for example, until May, this decision, that puts us in front of you in June for a first information item with the curricular resource we would be recommending, in July for a discussion item, and then in August for an action item. That would prohibit us, obviously, moving forward with a purchase of that resource for the upcoming school year. We would likely try to purchase it in August, but again, with what we're hearing from these companies, it wouldn't be in the hands of students by that point in time. And then in addition, I would say our teachers, for the most part, do a lot of the heavy lifting around a new curricular resource in the summer. And so to delay that until the school year begins, we've made it work before. We're doing it now where we have curricular days where we pull teachers from their classrooms. Again, never ideal to pull teachers away from kids, but that would be the timeline then that we would be looking at, is rather than doing that curricular work in the summer, we would be doing it in the school year. And then I would say the last implication is that, again, we're all here to impact student achievement. And if I go back to that root cause where we're curating our own stuff, the longer that that's postponed, the more we are living in that land of teachers are still curating and finding their own materials. We're anticipating some new social studies teachers in our district, and that when we can't hand them anything except for the UBD, some Blackboard courses, it can feel daunting to them.
Mr. Dietz?
Yes, Ms. Roddy, and then Dr. Biasi.
Thank you. Just to make sure I'm understanding.
Yep.
Option 1 and 2. In option 1, personal finance is required. Students have the option to elect econ.
Correct.
That would be the same thing in option 2. They get to choose which one they consider required and which one they consider elective.
Correct.
So they have the option either, they could do either or on both.
Correct.
The main difference between 1 and 2 is that there's dollars attached to 1.
Correct.
Why is that? What in the state's requirements only allows it to be with that?
So because they require that personal finance, the grant requires that personal finance is a requirement for you to access that money. So in option 1, by saying you're required to take it, we have access to those dollars. I had actually Molly, as recently as today, I'm like, double, triple check that with option 2, we don't get the funds. We do not get the funds if it becomes you choose.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. Biasi.
Thank you. So I've had a lot of time with Rachel and Jody, and I appreciate your openness and transparency about all of this, and I've already shared a lot of my concerns about not wanting or supporting removing econ from the curriculum. But I would just like to respond to some of your all questions based on my understanding of conversations with Rachel and Jody so that we're all on the same page. And first, I just want to clarify, for me, option 3 is the only viable option, and I want to explain why in my perspective. I don't think that we should be moving our entire curriculum for a $30,000 grant. I know that it seems like something substantive, but I think it's insufficient to move our whole curriculum. So I just want to say that. I believe that the staffing is already in place to some degree, at least at West High School, and to a certain degree at South High School, because we're already, I don't know if the rest of the committee understands this, but we are already scheduling students for a year of world history at West and often at South. So I think the greatest impact would be at North and then at South, but I think West already has the staffing in place for 85 to 90% of students.
That's correct.
So I don't want to overstate what the cost associated with the resources are with this, because I think in some cases we're already doing it. Also that if 375 to 400 of our high school students are registered for personal financial planning this year, that's 1,600 of our high school students over a 4-year period. So 30 to 40% of our high school students are already electing personal financial planning as an elective. So they're choosing this without us forcing them to have to take it, which is a good thing. The other thing is that if we made personal financial planning or econ the requirement, econ still has to have the personal financial planning standards infused into it, the 4 weeks of personal financial planning, because we're giving them a choice. If we require just the econ, at least the state PFP standards are built into econ, but we can't say that, I mean, I know the proposal is to infuse the econ standards into the social studies curriculum at large, but we haven't done that yet. So at this point, we already have the PFP standards in econ, but not the other way around.
Can I just add one piece, Kelly? Dr. Piax, I'm sorry. I do think that based on what our teachers presented in, I think it was March, the infusion of those economic standards, while I think needs enhancement, and that's part of our curricular design process and part of why we're looking at curricular resources, that infusion would not be brand new. That is something that I think Steve Rux did a beautiful job, and I think it was included in your board packets of illustrating how all but I think one economics strand is already integrated into U.S. history. So I don't want to present that it would be a brand new concept to infuse those concepts, because I do think it's already happening, but agree that it would need enhancement, and again, that's part of our process.
I understand that, and I think the big question for me is also the degree to which the students even understand that they're being taught economics. Maybe in some cases that's a good thing.
Right.
But I think, understanding where that is, and then I raised this before, but the major concern for me is the AP track, because those kids are already taking a year of human geography, world, and US, and those standards are set by the College Board. And so, and I appreciate you shared the context around that, and some of that is there, but it's not there in the form of a formal economics course. And so I think that, that curriculum is just not obviously present. You can pull it out in some cases, but it's not obviously present. And then the other thing for me is that because this Assembly Bill 899 that actually proposes the 1 credit of financial literacy, it's 1 credit, it's not 1 semester, it would be an entire year. So if we took option 4, we would simply have to add personal financial planning to econ, and we would have that 1 credit covered. And so we would have that 3.5 credits of social studies plus that 1 credit of personal financial planning. Now, it didn't make it this time around. It might come back around in the next session, I don't know. But this approach would actually have us more than halfway there to a state requirement on financial literacy, if that were to happen.
Yeah, sorry.
So I was just going to clarify that I feel like it's premature, and that's my biggest concern. However, I would be more inclined to move toward the year of world and leave everything else the way it is for now until we figure out what's going to happen at the state level, or until we can demonstrate that those economics standards can really be infused for all students and not standard track, but also AP. And I think part of that would be demonstrated by what curricular resource we choose and how that's actually going to roll out. And again, I think the biggest impact is probably going to be for North students, who right now have a large percentage that are just, well, all of them are just taking that semester of world. So I think we have to see that before we can change it.
Yeah, so a few pieces. One is in regards to the being set up if the state were to pass that bill, I think that really probably goes both ways, because right now, again, if we were to require personal finance and the state changed it to a 1 credit, we would most certainly be looking then at econ, right? So really, it's either any of the options, I think, position us to be halfway there. And then in addition to what you mentioned about the resources, I think I would echo what you're saying, that these resources do a beautiful job of explicitly helping our teachers to integrate the standards, as well as being a little bit more transparent than what we typically see, again, in a home curated handout. So if you've ever read a history, well, you're going to get lots of them next month, right? History textbooks, right? They're directly connecting to those big themes, and so those explicit connections will hopefully continue to be enhanced for our students. But with that said, again, without knowing what the course sequence is, if world history stays a semester, I can't do what you're asking me to do, which is, right, move forward with curricular resources, because that would be a purchase, and without knowing what the sequence is, it doesn't make sense, at least to me, to make that purchase.
And if I could just follow up
Yeah,
on
go
that, and
ahead.
that's why I would support the move to the year of world, but maintaining the econ requirement. So world, US, human geography, plus government, plus econ equals 4. And I just want to clarify again for the other committee members, and this is not to just keep dragging us back there, but the social studies is the only area where we require more than the state minimum for graduation. So we're on par with every other subject area. And we're like a lot of other districts, Kettle Moraine and Pewaukee are 2 that have 3.5 credits for social studies. But part of that is because we have the human geography requirement in addition to world history and US, which, as far as I can see, no other districts require the human geography. So we would be very unique in that we're unique in requiring econ, but we also unique in requiring human geography. And so if we can't throttle those one way or the other, even if we remove econ, we're still at 3.5 credits. So it's a lot of social studies. And I also completely understand that some students struggle with econ and don't want to take econ. I think the students that maybe don't struggle with econ might not want to take world history. So I think it's, maybe it's an even Steven compromise, but I think that's all over the place, right? Whatever
Absolutely.
requirement we put in, there's going to be somebody who doesn't want to take it.
Of course,
So
of course.
that may be strength and conditioning, so.
Yep.
Any further comments? I would be looking for a motion.
Mr. Dees, can I ask one more question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh my gosh. I totally went blank on your name.
Rachel, that's okay.
I'm so sorry. I'm
It's
staring
okay.
at you and I'm
There's
like,
a lot going on.
Rachel, Miss Herman, how's that? Forgive me, I'm so sorry.
Don't worry about it.
I wrote down a really fast note, and I make sure I heard it correctly. Did you say option 3 does not align with the state standards?
Option 3 does align with the
Does.
state standards, yes.
Okay, I don't know why I thought I heard that. I'm
That's
sorry.
okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Baumgartner.
I'm not going to make a motion because I'm not sure that everybody has their own idea in mind. I mean, I do. It's been evident. I believe if anything is required, it's personal finance. If we have a chance to have, options to pick personal finance or economics, that's okay. I think there's an advantage to that because we might find out how many people really should be attending one or the other. Although I believe personal finance should be required. And that's embedded in me. So, but I don't know, I mean, I know where I would vote, but I don't know if everybody else is comfortable with that. It doesn't sound like it, so. Maybe you have to ask if that's the question. Nobody's offered to make a motion.
No, I know.
Telling us something.
Well, and the other, I guess, question I would
Right.
have is if there's additional information that you need from me to help inform which option, please let me know. I mean, happy to provide any additional information.
Mr. Como?
Well, I do think if there is additional staffing with option 3, I need to understand that. And, to Kelly's point, we shouldn't be double counting if the school is already, set up to handle option 3. I need to have the full policy in front of me with respects to requirements.
Graduation policy?
Yeah, option 3 just throws a little bit of a wrench into it for me. If we were looking at option 1 and 2, I might be able to make a decision, but option 3 I didn't see an addition of a half credit. Again, maybe to some people that doesn't seem like much, but that's an elective that we're taking away from some student who might be really interested in something. And we're kind of in the middle. I don't always necessarily like being in the middle of things, but as far as required credits go, I kind of like being in the middle. It's sort of like students have options to choose elections, but, we're not, going down to the bare minimum. I think that the state requires is like 15 or something like that,
Right.
So I'm pleased with where we're sitting amongst our local, the other local districts. But I think I personally need a little bit of time to digest, because I'd like to consider all 3 options, but it would be difficult for me to vote for option 3 without really seeing the policy right now, the full policy.
Sure.
And maybe I should have visited that ahead of time, but I didn't know.
Okay.
So I couldn't.
That's okay.
Right.
I'm happy to come back in May, and with the same ask, I guess, of the approval of what the recommended social studies sequence would be. If you need more time, and again, please reach out to me in between now and then if you have additional questions. I wrote down some of the information you're looking for that I can most certainly send your way.
Dr. Piazzi?
Thank you. Would it be appropriate to take this then to the full board as a discussion item? I know, now we're a couple months into this. We've been around this a couple times. We did go deep into the graduation requirements policy at the policy meeting.
That's a good idea.
Last time. So some of us have had this conversation many, many, many times. And if a large number of individuals are feeling comfortable with a certain option, that's okay. And we can move something forward, and then it's going to come to the full board, and I think we'll find different perspectives there too. But
Right.
one concern I have is that, we'll vet all these things here, and then we'll take it to the full board, and we're going to start all over again, and then we'll bring it to policy. I think the policy piece to me is just making sure the policy fits the TNL and board recommendations. I don't think it starts there. I think it ends
Correct.
there.
Correct.
But I wonder, if the consensus is that there's no consensus and we want to have more of a discussion around this, maybe being able to answer some of those questions. I feel like I've had those questions answered, but I appreciate that not everybody has dug in at that level. So maybe that would be good to get that out of the way for the whole board, rather than come with a recommendation and then start
Right.
unraveling all of that.
Right.
I can most certainly.
Mr. Como?
Sorry.
Yeah, we typically agendize discussion items at the committee level, also at the full board level. So would carry on with the tradition that we usually have. I don't ever recall a time where we said we would have a discussion item only at the committee level, and then when it came to the full board, we wouldn't have that. So, yeah, so I concur with what you're saying. And I think we traditionally do that, so that's all I'm saying.
I was just thinking, since this was agendized for action and not discussion, but obviously there would be some discussion if we were taking another vote at the board, so.
Right. Right. Okay. I guess that's where we're at. Rachel?
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. So we'll hear about it more next week. Yeah, go ahead.
Point of clarification.
Ms. Landish.
So it would be, just so you know this, for next week's full board meeting, there was no action on the motions presented. we'll give the three motions. I'm looking at you, Mr. Como, right?
Yeah,
We'll just
so
open it up.
usually it's discussion and discussion and action.
Yeah,
or
okay.
With potential actions. So, I'm happy to put that on the full board agenda as a
Okay.
discussion item. And I think that people need to see the three options.
Right.
Need to see this additional information,
Okay,
just to say, hey, we broaden the discussion. If they had been following, if other board members had been following our committee meeting and missed this one,
okay.
then they have a chance to chime in. I think that would be good.
Sounds good. Okay. We are moving on to our discussion information items this evening. The first one is AP Science textbook update. Rachel stays, but she has a team with her.
Oh.
So welcome to all of you. Thank you for being here.
All right, so we are here to discuss, I've got Erica Yoss and Christina Schaefer, who are here to talk to you about the adoption of the AP Chemistry book. And I'm going to really let them take it away. They've been engaged in the curricular revision process through with this adoption, textbook adoption process. So Erica, take it away.
Thank you for having us. So we are here to talk about the adoption of the textbook Chemistry, the Essential Science, which you have a copy of. So this is just a repeat from the last time we were here. The reason we are looking for a new textbook is that the 6-year digital access was up. So we were required to purchase a new one, as AP does require that as part of it. And because of the AP College Board update to that, we want to make sure that our textbook matches what we're supposed to be teaching. So the resource that we want to move forward based on our piloting and our feedback is Brown. It's Chemistry, the Essential Science. It is a textbook that's used in many of the surrounding districts. It's been around for about 10 years. You can see this is on the 14th edition, so it's a pretty standard textbook. When our teachers team went through this and did the pilot and the deep dive into it, it was a unanimous decision by our entire team. They have really good illustrative materials, which is super important in terms of AP Chemistry. I don't know if any of you have taken such a class, but having those materials and really dig deep into the curriculum helps students understand the concepts on more of a modeling standpoint instead of just like the facts and the math and the memorization. The organization of the textbook completely follows the sequence of the College Board recommendations. And not only that, but it comes with the Mastering Chemistry, which is the online portal, which allows for students to build their understanding, to check for where they're at, and they get immediate feedback. The students actually really loved it too. The online study aids and the dynamic study modules, which are the units that they can build for themselves, really give them instantaneous feedback. They don't have to wait to get back to school to ask their teacher for what's going on. And especially with our high school schedule, you might not see your teacher for a few days. This really gives them that time to practice. And you can see on the screen, these are the practice problems that the students have access to. And then they will give them very in-depth feedback on it. It's not just multiple choice, it's models and math questions that they work through. Some of the key features or things that we really liked was obviously the direct connection to the AP exam, which is our ultimate goal for our students. The real-time feedback, those study aids built in, and those study aids can be downloaded and used without internet. So if our students don't have access at home, that doesn't mean that they don't have access to the study aids. They have full access without that. It does come with some additional information. Chapters 18 and then 21 through 24 aren't on the curriculum. However, we do have that time between the exam and the end of the school year where we do sometimes dig into some of those chapters for that extended and extension time for our students. So with this new book, our plan will be to do a lot of embedded work. We have the collaborative work time that's going to be built into the schedule next year. So we'll be able to PLC across the district to really work together to build this, as well as the times before school, those days that we have. So we'll be doing that, and as well as direct coaching support during the school year. So for costs, we would be getting 75 hard copies. That's the classroom set for each school. And then 75 electronic copies for 6 years. Our numbers change each year, but we want to make sure that we can support the highest number of students that we have each year for it. And that would cost $18,000 for the 6 years of that. And that is our resource.
I have a question.
Mr. Baumgart.
Just simply, did you look at some other material?
We did, yeah. So last month, in January, when we came here, we showed you the two that we were
I
piloting.
forgot about that already.
Yeah. So we tried the two, and this was the one that the teachers
Yeah.
selected.
Mr. Como.
So I'm going to date myself, right? So I graduated Waukesha South 1980, and when I was looking at the periodic chart, I'm going, there's been some things filled in since I graduated. And then I just Googled real quick. There have been 11 elements discovered
Yep.
since I graduated high school.
Wow.
I think the last one in 2017, Tennesseeum.
Yeah, it's like, in my mind, chemistry should be just staying the same, but, it's not.
Nope.
We continue to learn more and more about our world and understanding it, and being able to take advantage of that knowledge, right, and helping us, like in the healthcare industry. I had a brief conversation with Dr. Piasek on that before the meeting, and just, it's just phenomenal. Thank you for what you're teaching our children, which is very complex. Takes a lot of time and dedication from our students to really understand some of these topics. So I wish I could say that I truly could offer you some input on the book, but I'm not just quite there.
No, we leave that to the experts.
I'm having to, this is a way to say I'm having to trust you on this. So thank you for your efforts.
Anything else?
So I will be back then next month seeking adoption of this as a curricular resource. So if you have any questions in between now and then,
Very good.
reach out to myself or Erica.
Good.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you very much for being here tonight.
Got to do physics yet, don't we?
Next discussion information item, renewal.
So we have,
Sciences.
yep, we have one more
Oh,
science.
okay, one more.
Yeah,
Sorry.
we have
Sorry.
two more.
Two more.
Okay.
I'm going to just let Erica, you just keep going.
So we are here now for physics. Sorry, and we are here to do the adoption of the college physics, which is a strategic approach, which is the text that we decided to go forward with. Exact same rationale as AP Chem. We were up for renewal, and obviously College Board says that we are required to have a textbook, so we decided to look out to see what there were, and we, after looking at all the different resources, had two, and we decided to continue on with the text that we currently have, which is College Physics Strategic Approach, and by Knight. This is the 4th edition, but Knight and Jones have had many textbooks before this, so this is a common textbook in our area. So the teachers, when they went through it, what they found was that there were direct connections to the curriculum, which was our most important thing, follows the same organization. The Mastering Physics is the exact same as the Mastering Chemistry program, so it has the same features. And because this is a model approach, it really forces students and the teachers to look at their misconceptions. Physics is one of the more unique topics where you are exposed to it on a daily basis, and now you're understanding the misconceptions you might have had and what the real science is behind it, and that is what this textbook helps us do. Well, student feedback was very high. They felt that the readings were really concise and clear. They had really good visuals and graphs, and they also really loved that dynamic study modules, that online component to it. And again, there's some samples from what the students have access to, as well as the feedback that they get from the program. The real-time feedback was the key feature as well. Physics also has, in their Mastering Physics, embedded media, so they can actually see the situations playing out. Instead of trying to do the lab necessary in class, they can do the online modules. It shows them that, or it's just a repeat to help refresh a concept. And we can use the entire text because we use it for both AP Physics 1 and AP Physics 2. So our professional development plan, because of the way AP Physics 1 and 2 have kind of adjusted and changed over scope, we have a plan for this summer to kind of work together as a team of the AP Physics teachers to kind of build a more coherent plan so that we're working together across buildings, especially as we know many of our students from other schools attend AP Physics 2 at a different school, and we want to make sure that we're really providing a core experience for them, as well as using those collaborative times together across district, using like WebEx for us to meet together to work across the district. Costs, again, 75 hard copies, so there's a classroom set at each building. We will need about 200 electronic copies for 6 years because the numbers are higher. And that includes that Mastering Physics for 6 years, and that will cost about $36,000 total for all of that. So that is ours.
Questions on this textbook?
Yeah.
Mr. Baumgart?
Back to your copies. In the chemistry, you had 75 copies and 75 of electronic versions. And we have that many more?
Well, because physics is a requirement in our district, so AP Physics 1 will count towards that graduation requirement, so we tend to have a lot more students who take that course versus AP Chemistry.
But the hard copies will just be part of the district has those?
Correct, they'll stay in the classroom.
The other ones are going to be used up by the kids, the electronic?
Yes, so they'll be loaded on their iPads, but we will keep the hard copies in school, or if a student needs a hard copy as part of an IEP or whatever reason they might need it, we keep those for them.
I know you got control of it.
Anything else on
Good.
physics?
Okay, good to go.
All right,
Go.
thank you.
You're on a roll.
Thank you.
All right, last one.
Yes.
So my last one is the middle school resource, and we are looking for adoption of the iQuest program. So again, the rationale is similar. A 6-year digital access expired, so we are looking to maintain the program that we currently have, so that we can have a resource for our students and for our teachers. We looked at several options, but iQuest was really the only one that met our curricular needs for the middle school. And as if you remember from our January meeting, our data has shown that students are exceeding our expectations. It's grown significantly over the last 4 years. So we're really happy to see that this resource is helping both our teachers and our students learn at a high level.
Can I comment on that? I think it's also important to note as we, again, are exploring curricular resource adoptions, that at our middle school level, this is the only core area where we have purchased a curricular resource aligned to standards. And when we dig into those achievement results and we see that not only are all students continuing to grow, but our subgroups of students are continuing to grow, I think it really speaks to what you heard from Heidi Prescott last time, which was, I'm spending my time, right, differentiating, scaffolding, providing feedback, because I'm not busy trying to figure out the what it is that I'm supposed to teach. And she was a first-year to science teacher, but I think 20-some-year veteran in our district doing math. So I think that's important to note as we talk about the achievement connected to high-quality curricular resources.
Yeah, and we were able to get this resource when the state standards for science changed, and we were really ahead of the game for many other districts who hadn't even considered adopting a resource for those new standards, so it's evident. So we did want to make sure that we were checking with our teachers, though, to see how they felt about the resource. What they really liked was that it had a really direct connection and application of those standards. The way science standards are written is they are written as performance expectations, not content knowledge. It's you need to be able to do this with this skill around a certain content, and that's what this resource does. The units are built in a storyline, So they give a phenomenon or a topic that happens, and the storyline spirals around it. So by the end, they've figured out why this is happening. Why is the zebrafish population bad in Wisconsin? It goes around the storyline. Really strong literacy connections. And not just, we're reading in the content, but scientific literacy, which is super helpful, not only for our students, but for when they're, moving up into high school classes, they need to have that strong literacy background. All of the materials are translated into Spanish, not just here's your kid's book in Spanish, but all the teacher resources, all of the worksheets, all of the assessments are already translated, which is really helpful and helps our dual language teachers a lot. And it provides background information for families and for teachers. So if you're studying something that you're not necessarily familiar with, there's a huge resource for background information for the adults as well. Our student feedback, they really like the demonstrations. They really like Heidi Prescott, who's our science person who was here. Thank you for coming. They really thought that it was easy to understand because it's all there in one spot and it constantly is spiraling. It's not just you're moving from topic to topic to topic. It all kind of builds and gives you clear instructions. So here's some of our students working. What's really nice is that it's a huge focus on data analysis, writing and supporting your claims with evidence, and a lot of hands-on laboratory experiences, which is part of that program. The key features about this is three-dimensional, which means for science, they're supposed to be focusing on a content, a skill, and a cross-cutting concept, and it's phenomenological. I told you I'd say it right. Which means, again, that idea of they're giving them a science phenomena and they're trying to figure out why. We're not telling them the why, they're discovering it themselves. That spiraling content, so you'll see a weather unit in 6th grade and in 8th grade. It just builds that rigor up and digs deeper into it. It's got full digital access for all of us, and it can still be downloaded for use without internet. So our students who don't have internet at home still have access to the program, which is good. So our professional development plan, again, we're keeping the same curricular resource, so it's not going to be as intensive. The new teachers or new to science will receive coaching from myself around science specifically. We do have our monthly PLCs where I get to meet with the middle school, and then we also use our common assessments in a smaller PLC format too, so where they can constantly be looking to see, is this curriculum, how are we doing it, how are we teaching, what do we need to do to get better. So we are, that should be 3 years, I apologize. It is $162,000. That includes a teacher's additions and then a 3-year digital access. And that is for all of our middle schools, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. And includes money to update the laboratory materials and tools. As we get through them, we just need to provide the materials for them. The high school budgets are a little bit different than middle school, where they have that consumables built in. Middle school doesn't have that same budget for that. Questions on the middle school science?
Mr. Brumker.
I did look at some of these, and really were kind of fun to look at. I mean, quite simply, it was interesting, but when you were talking about some of the things you got out of it, and you talked about the literacy part of it, that just caught an interest with me. And because we were struggling around the district with making our literacy program stronger. And so are we connecting?
Yes, it is directly connected to the disciplinary literacy work that we're doing. I go through the same literacy trainings as all the other coaches, so I'm deeply embedded in that work, and this follows the gradual release of responsibilities format to a T. It's perfectly connected.
And that is so important, because so often but education has built these silos, and they, do it here, no, you don't worry about it over there. And that's one of the things we have to do, is knock that stuff down and we did it with the math program. We cut the silos away, and we're working with the math program, and you're talking about the literacy aspect of it. So I'm very pleased to hear that. So, kind of thing that sometimes gets missed.
Yeah, and that's the nice thing about, like, Dan Paczynski and I work together too, because a lot of the math standards connect to the science standards, and we figure out how we can make sure that those are aligning, especially for teachers like Heidi who are teaching both math and science.
Yeah,
Nice.
there's just been an incredible overlap and ways to, like, draw the kids in to mathematics, which is usually the tough sell, right? Because it's super rote and, or can be. And our program's always been heavily literacy-based, no matter what we built for math. But I just find that, you know, I can say to them, remember back in math when we learned about whatever it is, now today in science you're going to be, you know, independent variables, dependent, you know, those things that can be so abstract, especially at 11 or 12.
Oh, yeah.
Can be pretty clear when you see them in a science environment, so.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's,
Anything else?
All right.
good.
Okay,
you.
nice job.
Thanks, Heidi.
Erica, thank you for being here, as always. And Heidi, thank you for taking the time out of your evening.
What?
Next, we have a secondary English update.
Chair.
Rachel Herman, Director of Secondary Learning. We have Dee Garcia, our Director of Multilingual and Global Education. Tiara Rogers, our Director, of Equity and Educator Development.
Nancy Ronco.
And Nancy as well.
And Nancy, the Nancy. Nancy PhD.
She's back.
Yes, we have an update for you tonight, an information item around our high school English language art revision that has been going on. So if you wanted to go ahead and, thank you. So last time we came to was back in December, and we really, at that point in time, shared with you a little bit about the deep dive into the ELA standards that the team had been completing, a deep dive into what was the vision and the goal for literacy instruction going forward, and so we shared that with you. And so tonight, really our purpose is to continue to let you know where we're at in our curricular revision process, and in addition, introduce you to some curricular resources that our teachers are moving to pilot. So when we look at this, we're really talking in terms of this revision at this point in time about English 9, 10, 11, and 12. The English, again, we've talked about this with the social studies. English, and in the School District of Waukesha, we require 4 credits of English for our students. And so those are currently all required courses or their AP counterparts. As we get into the resources later tonight in this presentation, it's important to note that these are the same resources that would be used for the honors classes. So we have Honors English 9 and Honors English 10. We are having discussion with our visioning team around the need for that honors class. We have eliminated honors in pretty much every other area. And so English remains an area where we are seeing that distinguish difference, and we're having conversation, right? What are the pros, what are the cons around that? Very similar to what we did in the other departments. But as of right now, and especially for next year, these resources will be used in both classes. And then in terms of our advanced placement courses, I know early in the year you all adopted a new textbook for our AP English 11 Literature and Composition course. All of our AP courses will continue to use the resources that have been adopted. So again, we follow the AP curriculum and the textbooks that align to that. So the resources you're seeing here would not necessarily be used in our AP courses for anything other than perhaps supplemental material.
So our rationale for our adoption is, first and foremost, the standards were updated in May of 2020. So we need to do a revision to our curriculum because we have not updated our curriculum since the 15-16 school year. So first and foremost, we need to make sure our curriculum is aligned to the most current standards that's out there. And also, as part of our visioning process, we looked at student achievement data, and these were just some of the outcomes that we were able to see. And I know you're not probably able to see it up there, but I know it's included in the information that you were provided. So one of our key performance indicators is our ACT data, and we're looking at the college college and career readiness of our students. So we looked back over the past 5 years, and we saw, first up top is all of our Waukesha High School students, and over the course of the past 5 years, less than 50% of our students have met or fallen below. So less than 50% are achieving college readiness or would be considered college ready based on the reading ACT when we're looking at those different skills. So that's represented in the blue up there. And if you're looking at the bottom, we just skipped back. Okay, so, and at the bottom there is looking at one of our subgroups, which is our Black and African American students. So consistently, as a district, we're performing right below that 50%, which is represented in the blue. But if you look at our Black and African American students, that red is much greater when you're looking at, and we're looking at like less than 20% of our students are performing where we want them to be. Same data storyline with our English language learners. That red is representing students who are not considered college ready in reading. And lastly, we have our students receiving special education services. You see that similar storyline that we're not meeting the needs of those subgroups, but collectively across our district, our junior data is showing us that 50% of our students or less than is not good enough. So we have work to do.
One of the data points that I think is most interesting to us is the one about language learners. Oftentimes we believe that a test of English language based upon the norm of a monolingual English learner, of course, is going to show that students that are acquiring the language are not going to thrive as much. However, what we know about our English language learners here in the school district of Waukesha is that many of our students have been with us for some time. This is a national phenomenon. It is not unusual here. These students make rapid increases in their learning throughout elementary and then begin to plateau as they move into middle and high school. One of the things that we see about these learners is that they are often proficient in speaking, which means that they can appear to be, as you and I, native English speakers. What we find is that very skill that they have in being able to speak and transfer to literacy is not something that they are asked to do in the classroom. The graph that you see in front of you is actually representative of, I think, about 500 data samples we took shadowing our English language learners in the 9th grade across about 800 minutes of instruction. And we coded to see what these students were asked to do in the classroom. And what we found is that our students were asked to speak to anyone 8% of the time. That is very disturbing. We know that if students do have a skill in speaking, they need to be using that speaking as part of their literacy domains and their cadre of skills, and yet the curriculum that we have in place right now is not asking teachers to provide those collaborative opportunities for students to use academic language in the classroom. This is very disparate in terms of elementary. Our elementary school students spend much more time speaking in the classroom. As a result, we have almost the opposite outcomes at that level. It's something that we do seek to change in the future through the curriculum design process.
When we did our root cause analysis in the summer, our visioning team believes that we need a curricular resource so that we can have grade level standards and so that we actually allow for differentiation. So teachers aren't creating that differentiation, so that the curricular resource provides that. You can also see that we need resources for scaffolding that are already there, so we have access for all learners. That really leads us to the 3 pilots that we're looking at. Every single one of these connects to the gradual release of responsibility framework, which is our instructional framework in the school district of Waukesha, where speaking is an integral part of that because we want to make sure that we're nurturing independent learners and they have to be able to speak to it. So we looked at my perspectives, and you can see that there are some very well-known authors such as Kelly Gallagher and Jim Cummins. And then we also just finished up the pilot for Springboard, which is a college board resource. And right now we're in the middle of looking at StudySync, which has wonderful authors as well. Doug Fisher, one of the lead authors of StudySync, is one of the gurus behind gradual release of responsibility. You can see some of the neighboring district comparisons. Green Bay is somebody that I'm going to be speaking with tomorrow because they just implemented Study Sync and are seeing really great results from that. So I'm curious to find out more information about the details of that. But you can just see up there who's using what.
And I would add to that we've talked to you before, but we also use Ed Reports, which vets curricular resources at a national level, and all three of the resources that we chose to pilot started with a conversation there, and all three are highly ranked. My Perspectives is the #1 ranked resource on Ed Reports for ELA, and College Board, Springboard, and Study Sync are not far behind. So they are highly, highly regarded resources nationally.
Yeah, they were the top 3. So right now, we have at least one teacher from every single one of some from South, North, and West who are piloting. We will be done with our 3 pilots at the end of April, and then we're coming together April 20th to decide on a recommendation with that visioning team. We're collecting teacher and student surveys after each pilot window. I'm collecting video and student work samples as well. And then we also met with the family community group for feedback.
The District Curriculum Council. We brought these materials to them to ask for their feedback in addition to the literacy vision. So that was our February District Curriculum Council meeting.
So the goal is to finish the piloting by the end of April and then to come back next month to this committee with the visioning team's recommendation and an implementation plan.
Questions or comments for this group? Dr. Piazzik.
Thank you for all of this. I appreciate it. The resources themselves, are we talking about textbooks at the grade level? Are we talking about supplemental reading materials? What does the resource package entail?
Yep, there's, teacher edition and also student consumables, and there's also a very robust digital resource that comes with every single curricular resource.
So consumables would be like a weekly or some sort of pamphlet or something that has integrated materials?
Correct, it kind of depends. Study Sync has the unit consumables, My Perspectives and Springboard have the whole year consumable together.
Okay. And then how will things like signed reading or choice reading, how is that selected to align with the materials, or do they provide recommendations?
They do, they provide recommendations with each unit of study.
It would really be a both and, so all of the resources are the whole kit and caboodle in terms of providing that grade level resource as well as supplemental resources that can be infused. And in terms of, I think, specifically choice reading versus assigned reading, that's something that the curricular team, once they have the resource, would need to establish, right? What are going to be the guarantees that we think everyone in our system needs to experience, and what are we okay saying it's left to teacher choice or student choice?
Thank you.
Mr. Como.
When you look at instructional best practices, where do you get those from?
Sure, that's the research, right? That's I would say 90% of our time this year has been talking and living and breathing around what does best instruction look like, and we really rely on experts in the field. So Nancy referenced Doug Fisher. Doug Fisher and Nancy Fry are probably 2 of the top nationally renowned educational gurus, and have published many books on what serves all students at the universal level around what we're referring to as a gradual release of responsibility. And then it's just a continued corroboration of, that research. So, are other people saying that? And they are. And then it's just continued learning, attending through our, we have a director network that we meet with that is out at both connects us to national level learning as well as local learning. And so it's just an ever-evolving process. I will say that something that keeps, while educational practice might change, the brain theory and what we know about how students learn is something that we know we can speak to now. And so I think that's been transformational in our system, at least at the secondary level, is digging into how does the brain work, because that doesn't necessarily change, right? Your front cortex isn't suddenly your back cortex. And so the practices and the theories that we develop are all connected to what do we know about how kids learn. And that is a very different conversation than I've ever had in my 15-plus years in education. It's always typically been about the strategy or the what can we, pile on top of this kid's plate, what's the intervention. This is about what do we know about brain research, and it's fascinating stuff. We could probably talk to you all night about it, but that's what we use to ground our theory.
And I recall when you presented at a high level, some of that information to us before, and I'm glad to see that you're embracing it, right? I didn't mean it to be a trick question.
No, of course not.
But I just found it, the excitement and the engagement that you guys had when you guys were presenting this to us the first time, it was pretty powerful, actually. And I'm glad to see that you're still embracing that and utilizing that. And I'm sure there's challenges to that too. I mean, you're learning something new, right? Mm-hmm. And so I appreciate how complex this is. If you just read our purpose and background paragraph, there's just a sentence or two, but it's really packed with the whole effort that you guys are going through to really, look at this for us. So thank you for those efforts.
Yep. Next month you'll hear, I believe it's next month, the teachers will be coming as well. And as part of this piloting process, something that Nancy has excelled at is when the teachers come together to talk about the resource that they are piloting, with every one of those conversations, they connect the experience that they had with their students around the pilot to that learning cycle. So again, ensuring that what we say is supposed to happen instructionally aligns to the resource that we're going to recommend. And so that happens in all of our pilots, but Nancy has executed that beautifully with all of the teachers.
Thank you.
Yes. Anything else? Very nice job. Presentation, very thorough. Thank you very much for being here, and we'll see you next month.
I'm leaving the table now.
Next this evening, for discussion information item, we have the elementary writing pilot update. And we have Melissa Yao, our Director of Elementary Learning, and we also have Dee Garcia, our Director of Multilingual and Global Education, here to present this discussion item tonight. So thank you for being here.
All right, thank you. As Mr. Dietz said, we are here. I was a little bit excited, and I guess we're going a little bit overboard and didn't need to come for 4 times, but when there's good things to talk about, right, you need to hear it. So we won't be long, but wanted to give you an update on how the pilot is going. So
here we go. We embarked on a revision process for our elementary writing and language arts standards this past February, where we launched a pilot of being a writer, and then went through that phase until March 15th and launched our second pilot, which is the benchmark resources. As you can see from the timeline ahead, the second pilot is currently underway. Teachers have responded to the first pilot and are currently in the second pilot. We're getting rave reviews, and by May 3rd, we will be back here with a discussion item around a recommended resource, so that we can hopefully help you move to decision by June 7th on elementary writing.
just wanted to give you a little bit some of the high points from both of the resources. So as we said, we piloted being a writer first, and that has been completed. Some of the things that we liked about the program, this is feedback from teachers, students seeing it live in action, going through the resources and also through the feedback that teachers formally gave. So it starts off with an immersion experience, so where you are using text to study the type of writing that the students will be learning in that unit. It also infuses grammar into the writing. It also has an explicit unit on test taking at grades 3, 4, and 5. It also comes with robust formative and summative assessment resources. Then in our benchmark pilot, we are in our second week currently. Once again, has a rich immersion experience that starts out for students at the beginning of the unit using mentor text. It also follows a gradual release of responsibility into all of the lessons, so there is a standard predictable format for the students across the grade levels. It also comes with a grammar component, but that is an additional 10 minutes outside of the writing block that we would have. So there is that resource that comes with it, but it is an additional time for that explicit grammar instruction. This resource comes in English and in Spanish. You'll hear a little bit more about the Spanish piece, but one of the reasons that we did choose this resource is because it's not just a translated resource. The individuals who worked on the Spanish piece, there's tons of authentic text. There is also a lot of scaffolds for language learners throughout the resource. It also has test-taking unit. It grades 3, 4, and 5, and then has a plethora of assessment resources. So during the pilot, we're making sure that we see the pilot in action. So Emily Freeman, who is our elementary district literacy coach, has been visiting every single classroom, talking to the teachers, students, seeing the pilots in action, and she is doing that. She did that with Being a Writer and also with Benchmark, and has captured pictures, captured quotes from teachers, also been able to take notes of what things we would need to zone in on for professional learning, or maybe some supplements or things that we might need to address. Also just wanted to remind you that how we are assessing these two resources, we're using the same rubric, and it does come from Ed Reports, so we took out pieces of that aligned to a writing resource, and so that's what we used to narrow down our 3 resources down to 2, of which we are going to pilot. So our teachers already did fill out this rubric for Being a Writer, and they will do so again in 2 weeks for our benchmark writing.
So as we move forward in the piloting process, what we are going to be doing is having ongoing professional development for both of the resources. So when Being a Writer was first launched, we offered professional learning for teachers before, during, and then the survey following the pilot. The same is true for Benchmark, to make sure that our teachers feel confident in implementing what we would call a short unit or a short cycle of pilot. As we move forward, what we are going to be doing is working with our literacy coaches through the pilot 1 and 2 to make sure that our literacy coaches can adequately support the implementation during the pilot, but also so that they can get access to how each of the pilots are aligned to the state standards that we're working with. As we move forward, you can see that we are consistently referring to What Works Clearinghouse as a source of research on what works for elementary writers. There's also a adolescent version of that same document that condenses and pulls together all of the research-based best practices that are recommended in the area of writing. Oh, we lost our slide.
Sorry, the next slide just says questions, so if you have any questions.
Good timing.
Yes.
Anything for Melissa or Dee?
Questions?
All right, well, we'll be back next month. We will be bringing some teachers with
Yeah,
us.
that'd be great.
So you will be able to hear from them, from their students on how the pilots went, and also we'll be bringing forth in that time of talking about both of them, which one we are recommending.
Sounds good. Thank you again for being here tonight.
Question is, I want to say this out loud, samples for the board in terms of the pilots? Are we just going to wait till they're recommended, or do you?
We will be, with what we're recommending, we will be giving them the samples of the recommended resource.
Okay.
Before the next meeting, or?
Yeah, we'll probably know in a week and a half, and then we'll get them to you. And if you want to see them before we have it, it's There's 6 teacher TEs at every single grade level.
If I could, just.
Sure.
Please, and
Sure.
just to clarify, with writing, I think this is very different than when we're talking about a textbook, if I'm understanding correctly. So looking at those materials and understanding how students are interacting with them would be really helpful.
Yeah, there are teacher, with both resources, there are teacher books, and then there are also some student workbooks as well, along with then the writing, right, students would be using paper and that sort of thing and creating our own notebooks, but there are some supplemental student materials as well as the teacher materials. And both have digital components as well.
Sounds good. Look forward to seeing you next month. Thank you. Next this evening, we have a Bridges Math Pilot Update, and we have Melissa Yao, our Director of Elementary Learning, here to give us that information. So, welcome again, Melissa.
Thank you. So I'll be talking tonight about a Bridges pilot that will be happening at Hatfield with the merger between Hatfield and Whittier. So it was one of the requests of the merger. And so the rationale for this, the elementary mathematics will be in our curriculum cycle review during the 22-23 school year. So that was already on the docket to happen. So this pilot will be taking place a little bit earlier part of our pilot. I'm sorry, okay, there we go. Our current resources of Origo, Dreambox, and Matific take us through the end of next school year. Coinciding with that, the DPI has updated their mathematics standards. Those are rolling out in a 3-year phase, so similar process as the social studies phase. So they came into adoption in 2021. And so the first phase is that understanding. The second phase is curriculum, and the third phase is that assessment and instruction. And DPI has said that these will be in place for the 24-25 school year. So we have already started out during our Winter Institute and took our mathematics teachers through a study of what the changes are in the standards, and we'll be continuing over the next 3 years to help support them in that understanding, as well as going through our pilot and adoption of a resource. So as I said, this request came from the merger and wanting to make sure that they had a resource that helped with a heavier lift and helped them more with the vertical alignment across kindergarten through 5th grade. Districts in the area that are using Bridges: Elmbrook, Germantown, Menominee Falls, Kenosha, Greendale, Pewaukee, and then Green Bay is a district that is one of the large districts comparable to us that's also using Bridges. Bridges scored meets expectations in all 3 of the areas of ed reports at every single grade level. So they look at it at every grade level, kinder, first, second, third, fourth, and fifth. Every single one of those meets expectations in all 3 areas. We will also be using the ed reports rubric to evaluate this pilot and resource. So in Bridges, it comes with teacher guide, so those manuals in hand. It also has a digital aspect to it too, with digital tools and games for students. It comes with student workbooks, a manipulative kit, so it's enough manipulatives for a class of 30 students. There's also digital manipulatives as a part of the digital resource. And there's also a component in there called a number corner, which is similar to like a calendar math experience where it's a similar format. They look at different types of patterns across the different standards of mathematics. So it's a little bit of an additional time in there. Bridges is a combination of direct instruction, of investigation, and open exploration. And it does this through 3 different components in each of the lessons. It starts out with problems and investigation, and that's where that direct instruction comes in. And then there are workplaces. Sometimes you might refer to that, something similar that you might have heard or seen and experienced in your own children's, where they have like centers, so it's that application time, so how are students then practicing, having that open exploration and investigating mathematics and practicing what they have learned. And then there's the number corner piece as well. So what questions do you have?
Questions on Bridges? Comments? Mr. Baumgart?
Yeah, going back to the beginning, I know you're using this at Hatfield Whittier.
Yes.
Elsewhere?
Not next year. Next year, we will be going through the full curricular design process, so we will be including another pilot, but we'll be looking at a few resources, narrowing down, but Bridges will be one of those.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Dr. Piazza?
Thank you. Just to clarify that, so we will be looking at things other than Bridges.
Correct, next
Would
year.
that include some of the existing resources like Origo?
It could.
Okay.
We always look at, just like with our writing, we looked at our current Calkins to see if that was still a viable option. With writing, it didn't end up being one. We will look at the Origo we'll look at Origo stepping stones to see if that is a resource that we want to continue, because it could end up being that we want to do that.
I think Ed Reports actually rated them higher, or one of the higher programs, so it seems like we have, what's that?
Yes, you're right
Yeah.
Oracle.
Yeah, we have a strong program, and I understand the request for Bridges, and I think you kind of said it, like it may be a heavier lift, or maybe Bridges offers us something for, is it a higher acceleration for a student who is behind grade level? And that would be helpful to understand. Is there something about Bridges that's unique, that's going to help students catch up faster?
Yeah.
The other thing, just keeping in mind that we want students to be able to, with consistency across the district. So that
Correct.
we're not doing something in one school that we wouldn't be able to support if they moved or transferred within, so. But, I mean, I'm excited to see the potential for this, I just, we're doing other things too.
Yeah. No, we will be looking at other resources, including our current as well.
Sounds good. Anything else from Melissa?
Thank you.
I think you're done for tonight.
So you'll see me back a lot next year talking math.
Sounds good, Melissa. Thank you so
All right.
much.
Thank you all.
Our last discussion information item is about the forward exam, some sample test items and accommodations. And we have Amy Riebel, our data communications liaison, here with us this evening. So thank you for being here, Amy.
Hello. Let me get connected here. So a couple months back, Mr. Baumgart and I had met, and he had a request for information around the forward exam. So we're going to go through that here briefly tonight. We're going to talk about 4 things. First of all, I have a test for you. I have some sample items. We'll talk about a little bit about the types of items that the forward exam includes. We'll talk about the proficiency. That's a big word that we've talked about many times, but specifically related to the forward exam and the Wisconsin state standards. And then we'll talk a little bit about the supports and accommodations that we can provide to students in order to kind of even the playing field for students with disabilities and students who are English learners. So first of all, I realized that we included this in your packet, so you already have the answer key, so that probably reduced some of the stress.
Thank you.
But nevertheless, here are two example questions. This first one is from the 7th grade ELA test, and it asks a student to read a paragraph and then identify the best conclusion for the paragraph. So have to draw some, do some deeper thinking there rather than just a traditional multiple choice of kind of rote material. So the answer was C. So hopefully you got that one correct. This one I know is difficult to read. This was an 8th grade math item, and does allow for a calculator on the math test. Some of the items are calculator items and some are non-calculator items. And it asks the student to look at the conversion between a US dollar and another currency and which has the greatest rate of change. So the student had to work each piece in order to understand what the answer was, but also not be distracted by perhaps currency that they'd not heard of before or couldn't pronounce the name of. So there were multiple pieces to this one as well. So if you got the answer of A, you were correct. So
Yeah, kids that travel to Europe now, they got it so easy compared to when I was fortunately over there. Every country having a different one.
Exactly.
Got good at it.
Yeah, for sure.
And if I made a mistake, oh, crud.
So those two items were both examples of a selected response item on the forward exam. And again, 7th grade ELA and 8th grade math. There are three different types of items, that selected response, which you saw an example of, which might be a more traditional multiple choice, might be an enhanced selected response, which might be a fill in the blank, or might ask a student to take a table of data and plot it into a graph, and then perhaps find the average or something like that. And then a two-part evidence-based selected response would ask a student to read something and then answer multiple questions, one around accuracy and then one where were asked to provide evidence. There are a number of technology-enhanced items on the test. Might be putting hands on a clock. Again, putting together a graph, dragging and dropping items to sort, those kinds of things. And then a longer text-dependent analysis is the first part of every English language arts test, which asks the students to read a passage and then construct a longer response. And they have 5,000 characters in which to do that, so it's a longer test type. So those are the different types of items that you would see. Those two sample items I showed you came from this year's release of sample items. Every year we do get sample items. We share those with teachers so that they can both use them with students and fuse them in their classroom instruction, but also look at them as professional development to understand the types of questions that the forward exam is being asked. They are also linked in the information we share with parents annually as we prepare for the forward exam. So a parent could go and see those items, and if you Google DPI and forward exam, they're linked online as well, so anybody could see those items. So just as a reminder, ooh, that's kind of smaller. My eyes are getting tired. Just as a reminder, the English Language Arts test is given in grades 3 through 8. Math is grades 3 through 8. Science is grades 4 and 8. And social studies is grades 4, 8, and 10. And forward exam is administered every spring. We're doing it right now, as required by the federal Every Student Succeeds Act. It's considered our summative assessment that measures what students know and can do in relation to our Wisconsin state standards. So it is a Wisconsin-specific test, was first used in 2016, and it is an online assessment. So students can do it on their iPads or Chromebooks or a desktop. And obviously we continue to use it today. Before we used the forward exam, for 1 year we used something called the Badger exam, which was connected to Common Core standards and was part of the Smarter Balanced Consortium. That was also an online test. So we just used it the 1 year. And before that, we used the WKCE, which some of you may remember, and that was a paper pencil test. So if you had a younger child who took the test in 2010 and a student who's taking it now, they're taking two very different assessments. So when a student takes the forward exam, they get a score for each subject area that they take. And that score is assigned based on this table here to a proficiency category. So it's where your score will fall depends on grade level and subject. But the proficiency definitions are the same regardless of grade level or subject. So the score falls in one of those four categories: advanced, proficient, basic, or below basic. And so each of those performance levels is connected to college level readiness. So for example, the advanced rating or proficiency level says a student demonstrates thorough understanding of and ability to apply the knowledge and skills for their grade level that are associated with college content readiness. A proficient level, a student would demonstrate adequate understanding. Basic, student demonstrates partial understanding, and then below basic, a student demonstrates minimal understanding. So that's how those ratings come about. They're all based on that scale score, cut score chart. One of the questions that I get from time to time and that Mr. Baumgart and I talked about was how rigorous are our state standards and have they changed over time? And so I shared with him some charts that came from a study from the National Center of Education Statistics, and I have a number of these, and you saw these in your packet. But they mapped the state proficiency standards, and they compared each state. They couldn't measure every state for a couple different reasons, but for every state they could measure, they have mapped the state's proficiency standard to the NAEP proficiency standard. And the NAEP is the National Assessment of Educational Progress. It's given every other year to selected 4th and 8th grade students across the country. Every year that they administer it, just about we have students who are selected to take it. And it's considered the nation's report card. So if you hear in the news, we have new NAEP results, and it's kind of a measure of how students have done over time. The NAEP standards stay the same from administration to administration, but what's changed over time are the state standards. So I could find a study back to 2007. So I took 2009 and I took 2019, so that's a 10-year comparison. This chart here is the 4th grade reading proficiency standards from 2009. So this top line is the NAEP proficiency bar. So for 4th grade reading, to be proficient, a student would have to have a 238 on the NAEP exam. These points are the different state proficiency standards or proficiency ratings from 2009. So you can see that at that time, no state had a proficient standard that met the NAEP proficient standard. Now there's a whole other conversation we could have about the NAEP standard, but that's the standard that stays constant. Here's Wisconsin in the circle. So that bluish purple dot is our state standard kind of NAEP equivalency score, and then the bar is the plus or minus 2 for the standard error. Fast forward to 2019, you can see all the states have moved up, and Wisconsin is much closer to that NAEP proficiency standard. Shared those same graphs. Here's 4th grade math standard. Again, Wisconsin's in the circle. This is 2009, and then 2019. So we're actually right on that NAEP proficient score. And then 8th grade reading in 2009, and 8th grade reading in 2019. Our proficient standard in 2019 was actually above the NAEP proficient standard. And then 8th grade math in 2009, we were right at the NAEP basic line. And now we're above In 2019, we were above the NAEP proficiency standard. So the answer to have the standards has the proficiency expectation changed? Yes, it has changed. Every state has increased their proficiency requirement. So I thought that would be helpful for you to see as we have these conversations about what proficiency means across the country and in Wisconsin and in Waukesha. The last piece that Mr. Baumgart had asked me about was just about accessibility. Again, how do we make it equitable? How do we make it an even playing field for students who, again, may have a disability or are learning the English language? And so we want to keep the learning expectation high, but we want to kind of even out that playing field so there's no barrier or any negative effect based on a student's disability. So we do have a number of accommodations and supports that we can put in place. So I wanted to run through those just really quickly for you. There are actually 3 levels of supports. The first piece is universal tools. This is something that any student taking the test, regardless of disability, anything, any student can have access to these materials. Many of the embedded tools are things that are built right into the test module. So there's a calculator that pops up when it's appropriate. A student can click and enlarge. They can strike through things. They can have a little sticky note, electronic sticky note where they can jot notes. There are also non-embedded tools. Every student should have access to graph paper, to scratch paper, and when they're doing that text-dependent analysis, they should have access to a writer's checklist. And that's a tool that students can use in writing in class as well. So teachers have access to that throughout the year. So every student can have access to all of those tools. The second layer of accessibility features is called designated supports. And these are for students who have a need that's been indicated by a teacher, by a team of teachers, parent guardian input, student input as appropriate also. Typically these are things that a teacher would have talked to a parent about during a parent-teacher conference, for example, or you would hear that your child is having test items read to them so that reading isn't the barrier to being able to demonstrate what the student knows on the test, for example. So there again are embedded supports and the non-embedded supports. So on the left are some of the embedded supports. We can do things with the color of the test and the contrast that can help a student with attention concerns, also with visual concerns. We can mask out part of the test at a time if it's distracting. Students who are learning English can have English and Spanish stacked so that they can see both as they're going through the test. One of the features that's probably used most is I just kind of did a scan, of all of the features that are being used right now. We have about 500 students across the system who use text-to-speech. And so the computer voice will read the test to them, with the exception of the English Language Arts reading section, because we want to measure their reading skill there. And then we have the non-embedded supports. For example, students who couldn't handle that computer voice, because it's kind of an annoying computer voice. So a student with autism, for example, that might be really distracting. They could have a human reader read the test to them. A student who's learning Spanish can have the test read aloud in Spanish, again, except for the ELA section. So there are some different options there to, again, level the playing field for students without taking away the standard of learning. And then the final piece, this is available to much fewer students. These are called accommodations, and a student has to have paperwork in place to support the use of these, either an IEP if they're a student with a disability, 504 plan, and again, for all of these, they should be using this accommodation as a regular part of classroom instruction. We don't just do it for the forward exam. So things like video sign language, closed captioning, listening scripts. So we can print out the script for the student. And students who have a visual impairment, which we don't have anybody, I don't think, in this category this year, but with a visual impairment who, they aren't fluent in Braille yet, they can have the reading passage read to them. But those are the only students who can have the reading passage read to them. So it's very, very few students. So that's kind of the forward exam in a nutshell.
Mr. Baumgart.
Well, and quite simply, I asked Amy to give us some information on that and spend some time with it, because we were getting so chastised by the word proficiency that I felt it was not being understood. And I don't know whether this is going to uncover that or not, but certainly any of those people that have their doubts are entitled to take the test if they want to. I might end up asking some of them. And found out that, 40 is not the higher end, but it's not so horrible. In the state of Wisconsin, we didn't find anybody that even hit, was it 60?
70, I think.
We did hit close to 70?
Yeah.
That's that was the highest end. And, our neighbors have some above and some below, but, quite simply, it was being read one way, and we were being scolded for something that was much more complicated than reality that they were putting on it. So and I sat down with Amy, and it was kind of a shock to me that just how complicated this process was. And as I said before, it's not in the days of Dick and Jane like it was when I was learning to read, so it's...
The expectations around critical thinking, deep thinking about, and being able to provide evidence, it's definitely not the same as it was even 10 years ago.
And Amy, I'd like to thank you, because this was an extra project for you to do, but I really appreciated spending time on it. It was interesting.
I could go on for hours, but...
Oh, it's okay.
Mr. Como.
When was NAEP established?
That's a great question. Like I said, I found the study all the way back to 2007, but it's earlier than that, but I can look it up. I did not have that in front
I
of me.
appreciated the information you shared with us and how NAEP has stayed the same. And, I see the value in it staying the same, but then I'm like thinking, well, it's stayed the same for a long time, and our world has changed. I mean, we have 11 more elements. You know what I'm saying? Our technologies have changed. So should, and I appreciate a snapshot of standards, and I appreciate how, it's difficult as we've gone from WKCE to whatever the Badger one was, I can't remember because it was only 1 year, and then, the Ford exam, and it's really it's tough to compare from a longevity perspective, when you're changing tests, right? So, I'm kind of mixed between, well, standards staying the same for so long too. There's probably a downside to that, but, I appreciated the information that you shared with us in showing how all the states have really tried to raise their standards to that NAEP level. And so then it's like, well, if we've had, advanced and, the various levels, that have pretty much stayed the same for a long time. So have our standards changed? Have they become that more rigorous that we now have lower test scores over time? So what is that phenomenon that's really happening? And when you change tests, it's hard to tell because you don't have the longevity data. So take what we can from it, but I'm not sure what I'm taking from it tonight, at least. So.
Well, again, we could go on for a long length of time, but I think just one of the questions that Mr. Baumgart had was just, have the standards changed?
Right.
Are we measuring the same thing
Yes.
that we were measuring in 2009, and we're not? So
Right.
I think that's
No,
the first
I
piece.
really appreciated that, pointing that out, and great question, Bill, yeah.
Dr. Piazza.
Thank you. Thanks for doing this, Amy. It was really insightful, and I ended up actually going to the NCES website and reading the paper about how they modeled the, exams to exams, and because, of course, I'm kind of a geek about this stuff, too. I do struggle with this 10-year window, and if you go onto NCS website, you can actually see year by year by year for a specific state, like how we've moved within those boxes. And so since like 2013, it's pretty flat. I mean, this change kind of looks like we went from this to this, but what I struggle with is where, we show Wisconsin being, really these graphs are mapping the state's standard proficiency
Correct.
to NAEP's proficiency. It's
Correct.
not saying that this is a student performance, but they're
No,
using
this
student
is-
performance to map that.
Correct. This is just what the state expects as far as proficiency.
Yeah.
And yes, as you looked over time, there was a lift in 2013, but then it dipped back down in 2015.
With forward, and then
So,
it kind of
yeah.
came back up again. So it's interesting to take the time to go look at that, because I think it's very telling. But I think when I look at how our 8th grade reading proficiency standard, you could argue Wisconsin has one of the highest standards in the country. But then you look at the ACT, we just talked about the ACT reading college readiness, 39% of our students are actually, college ready from a reading perspective. So we have to make sense out of all of those pieces, because it's great to have high standards, but then when we compare again other national comparisons, where's the gap there?
Correct. Yes, we could go on for hours on this, but this is a first shot answering a specific question.
Yeah,
Yes,
it's very interesting, yeah.
I geeked out on that study too, so. And I'm not the only one.
Amy, could you briefly tell me what teacher prep is involved with this as far as preparing students for the forward exam? Is there something district-wide? Does each teacher do their own thing? Is it dictated by DPI?
Well, as far as preparing students, okay, so we prepare students all year long because we're teaching to the Wisconsin standards all year long. So it's really not an event to prepare. Teams do have some autonomy as to how they want to address the particular prep materials that we provide to each school. So there is some autonomy there. We expect every teacher and every student who's taking the forward to go through the online tools training and the sample items that are online. So they have practice with those tools in preparation for the test. So they're not struggling with those on test day. And so that embeds some of these questions that they see in that practice. But then teachers also have the opportunity, and I've worked with our instructional coaches and our principals over time on these items so that they can see the value in going through and having teachers look at these in a PLC meeting, but also embed them in their instruction. But if we have strong instruction related to the standards during the year, we shouldn't have to be doing too much prep. Now, teachers all have to be trained in taking administering the tests. There's about a half an hour training that they have to do, and then we do have to spend quite a bit of time making sure we know which student is getting which accommodations, and all of that has to be entered in the system for those embedded accommodations to pop up properly on test day, and also to make sure we've identified who's getting what non-embedded test items. So there is quite a bit of prep work just in the logistics before testing.
Had to be quite the challenge last year, this time.
It was, because we were inviting it couldn't be taken virtually, so all students had to come back in to take the test. So it did take some just logistical thinking through things in order to make it happen.
Yes, Ms. Ratty.
Yes, thank you. This actually kind of follows up to your question. I went in and sat, and I think I scared one of the teachers, because I came in and I came in, sat down, and I was like, I'm observing your class today. It was an 8th grade class. And they were prepping for the exam. And it was a social studies class, the ELA is what they were studying for, so 8th grade ELA. And I said, I'm just observing, we're going to be discussing this in TNL, and I just want to see it for myself. So I sat in the classroom, and these are just a few of the observations that I made, especially with regards to what you're asking and how we prep the students. They were working directly off of the DPI page and showing the students how to get in, how to log in, showed the students the tools. So this particular class used the sticky notes and the highlighters as they were reading their portion. Their question was to identify the blend of fantasy and reality. So they had to read this passage out loud. Some of the things that I had just written down as I was listening to them do this were, the teacher was giving strategies to dissect the passage and how best, for the different students who learned in different ways, and how to pick out what the question was. So they read the question in advance so that they knew what they were looking for in the reading. She was showing how to use the passage to support their evidence, so in answering their question. Once they had done their individual pieces, then they went into small groups and just kind of compared their thoughts. So as they were going paragraph by paragraph, she'd ask a question, a follow-up question. You maybe get 1, 2, or a forced, give me your thought. Well, after they did their small group discussion, then it went back to a full group. Well, in that small group, they get confirmation or, to hear others maybe had the same answer as they did. And that built confidence. You could see it, because as soon as the next question was asked, more hands were up in the air. And so that small group work gave them confidence in the big group work. She was explaining to them how this is showing them how, as 8th graders, they need to be practicing and learning to write as 9th grader, 10th grader, so on and so forth. So I know these tests mean a lot, and they show us where we're at a moment in time. I know not all students are good test takers. You might know that knowledge, but as soon as you see that test, you freeze. I know that's how I am. So you were talking about earlier the silos. As I was sitting watching and listening to this lesson, they were bringing in all these other skills of the reading skills and the social skills, and it wasn't just studying for a test, it was reinforcing other skills that they learned throughout the year. So I just want to give a shout out to Mrs. Rathers for that presentation, because like I said, I think she's like, what are you doing here? But it was just interesting. It was interesting to watch how the students were being prepared.
Yeah. And I think that's a great example of how it's, those strategies that she was using are strategies that she uses every day.
Right.
She was just happened to be using those test materials that day to build that preparation very specifically, but that finding evidence and talking with your peers, to having that conversation, those are things that happen every day. So we try not to make it radically different and really blend in with what they're doing. So that's
one of the other strategies too is just to, before a student reads the passage, read the question.
Yes.
To know what you're looking for. Then as you go along through, it focuses your attention on what you should be spending your time on. So.
Yes. And I was also thinking that practice with things like the sticky notes and the highlighter gets it out of their system before they get in there, because they're going to be a lot of fun. So that's good to practice ahead of time, so you're focused when you get in there.
That's a great report, though.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Anything else for Amy? Thank you very much, Amy, for being here. We're moving on to other business. Any recommendations for future committee meetings? Seeing none. We are going to be adjourned at this time. I want to thank all of you for being here tonight. Our presenters did a great job as always, and we look forward to having you back in the near future. Our next Teaching and Learning Committee meeting will be Tuesday, May 3rd, 6 p.m. here in the boardroom. Have a good night, everyone. Thank you.